Audience last night. No, I tell you.
He lost it on live TV, and moments too will leave you speechless. For 3 decades, Johnny Carson ruled American nights. He wasn't just a host. He was the heartbeat of late-night television. His laugh could bring down the house. His silence could make millions lean in. And his wit defined an era. Picture it. Carson doubled over, face hidden behind his hand, unable to control his laughter as Robin Williams spun out of control. The audience roared, the cameras shook, and millions at home felt they were witnessing lightning in a bottle. Moments like these weren't scripted. They were raw, unfiltered magic that made Johnny more than a TV personality. He became family to America. Tonight, we're not just remembering a talk show. We're reliving a cultural time capsule. From shocking monologues to tearful farewells, these are the 10 most unforgettable Johnny Carson moments. The kind that made him immortal. Johnny Carson wasn't called the king of late night by accident. These moments, hilarious, heartfelt, and historic, show why his legacy still lives on. The Tonight Show wasn't just another program on NBC. It was America's nightly ritual. From 1962 to 1992, Johnny Carson sat behind that desk and became the trusted companion of millions. Families gathered in living rooms, the glow of the television filling the space, as Carson's voice carried them into laughter before bedtime. This was the golden age of television. The set itself, with its heavy curtains, warm studio lights, and Doc Severinsen's band striking the opening theme, felt like home. Carson's presence was calm yet mischievous, elegant yet approachable. He had the rare gift of making Hollywood legends feel like neighbors, and ordinary viewers feel like insiders. For 30 years, his guests defined the culture of the moment. Frank Sinatra crooning, Muhammad Ali sparring with words, Robin Williams spinning chaos into comedy. These weren't just interviews. They were live events that stopped the country in its tracks. To remember Carson is to remember a time when television still felt communal, when one man's wit and warmth could unite a nation every night at 11:30. That is the world we're about to step back into, one unforgettable moment at a time. Moment 10. We go back to a night in the early 1970s when Johnny Carson stepped onto the stage and changed the very rules of late-night television. The audience settled in, expecting the usual clever one-liners about marriage, small-town life, or the weather. Instead, Carson leaned forward, eyes twinkling, and launched into a string of sharp political jokes that cut deeper than anyone on network TV had dared before. Viewers in the studio gasped, unsure whether they should laugh. But then Carson raised his eyebrow, paused with that impeccable timing, and the room erupted. The cameras captured him smirking, sipping from his coffee mug, and letting the laughter roll over him like a wave. Behind the scenes, NBC executives worried he might be pushing boundaries too far, but audiences at home couldn't get enough. In a time when the country was grappling with Vietnam, Watergate, and social unrest, Carson gave people a way to laugh at their fears without feeling divided. His monologues became a nightly ritual, not just entertainment, but a cultural pulse. For Americans in the 1970s, it felt like lightning in a bottle, television that dared to be honest, bold, and unforgettable. Moment 9. We find ourselves in 1965, on a night that was supposed to be routine, but instead delivered one of the most unforgettable accidents in television history. Johnny Carson welcomed actor and singer Ed Ames, who was there to demonstrate tomahawk throwing for the audience. A wooden target in the shape of a man was wheeled out, and Ames carefully took aim. The studio grew quiet for just a moment. Then the tomahawk left his hand, spun across the stage, and landed squarely in the most unfortunate spot imaginable. The audience exploded in laughter, gasps turning into roars that seemed to shake the studio walls. Carson, at first holding his composure, stared at the target with wide eyes, and then, unable to hold back, he bent over, laughing so hard he nearly collapsed. His timing, as always, was flawless. After the longest laugh in Tonight Show history, he delivered the now famous line, "I didn't even know you were Jewish." That quip sealed the moment as comedy gold. For years, NBC replayed it in retrospectives, and fans never forgot how spontaneous, risky, and hilariously human it felt. In that instant, Carson proved that sometimes the funniest moments aren't scripted, they just happen. Moment 8. We return to 1976, a night when two American icons shared the same stage, creating a memory that still echoes through television history. Frank Sinatra, the elusive legend of music, rarely appeared on talk shows. But that evening, he walked out onto the Tonight Show stage, and the audience erupted in a standing ovation. Carson greeted him not as a fanboy, but as an equal, calm, charming, and just mischievous enough to draw Sinatra out of his guarded shell. What followed was not a stiff interview, but a conversation between friends who happened to be giants in their fields. They talked about fame, about music, about the strange circus of Hollywood life, all while the audience leaned in as if eavesdropping on something intimate. Sinatra even sang a few bars, his voice smooth and timeless, while Carson sat back with a grin that betrayed both admiration and disbelief. For viewers at home, it felt like watching two worlds collide, the elegance of old-school show business meeting the wit of modern television. It was a moment that reminded America why Carson was so beloved. He could sit across from the chairman of the board himself and make it feel like a living room chat. Moment 7 takes us back to December 17, 1969, when The Tonight Show stopped being just late-night entertainment and became a national event. On that night, eccentric ukulele player Tiny Tim married his young fiancée, Miss Vicki, live on Carson's stage. More than 40 million viewers tuned in, an audience number rivaling the moon landing broadcasts earlier that same year. The studio was buzzing with anticipation, decorated like a wedding chapel, as Carson guided the ceremony with his trademark mix of wit and composure. When Tiny Tim, with his high-pitched voice and shy demeanor, said his vows, the audience alternated between laughter and genuine tenderness. Carson, ever the ringmaster, played it straight, sprinkling in light jokes that only heightened the surreal beauty of the occasion. For many, it was the first time late-night television blurred the line between talk show and live spectacle. Tiny Tim leaned in for the kiss. The band struck up a tune, and Carson's grin told the whole story. This was television history being written in real time. To this day, that wedding remains one of the highest-rated episodes in Tonight Show history, a reminder of Carson's unmatched ability to turn the unexpected into the unforgettable. Moment 6 brings us to 1981, when Robin Williams stormed onto Carson's stage like a hurricane of pure comedy. From the second he sat down, Williams was in constant motion, leaping from one impression to another, improvising at lightning speed, creating entire worlds out of thin air. Carson, usually the master of control, tried to steer the conversation, But it was impossible. Within minutes, he was doubled over, his head buried in his hands, gasping for air between bursts of laughter. The audience roared along, caught up in the sheer chaos that Williams unleashed. What made the moment unforgettable wasn't just Robin's manic brilliance, but Carson's reaction. The king of late night, famous for his composure, simply couldn't keep up. His eyes watered, his shoulders shook, and for a brief span, it looked as if the show itself might completely unravel. Yet Carson's willingness to surrender, to laugh with the rest of America, made the exchange magical. For viewers at home, it was like witnessing two comedic galaxies colliding. The calm, razor-sharp timing of Johnny Carson against the wild, explosive energy of Robin Williams. It was television at its most alive. A reminder that sometimes the best moments are the ones no one can script. Moment 5 celebrates one of Carson's most enduring creations, Carnac the Magnificent. For nearly 3 decades, Johnny would step onto the stage wearing a shimmering turban, holding sealed envelopes to his forehead as though channeling mystical powers. The setup was simple. He would announce an answer first, then dramatically tear open the envelope to reveal the absurd question inside. Yet each delivery was pure gold. Sometimes the answers were sly digs at pop culture. Other times they were groan-worthy puns that made Ed McMahon laugh so hard his booming "ha ha ha" became part of the act. Carson played Carnac with mock seriousness, stumbling across the stage, pretending to trip, or pausing just long enough to let the punchline land perfectly. The audience waited for that pause, already giggling before the reveal, and when the joke hit, the studio would erupt in laughter. What made Carnac unforgettable wasn't just the jokes, but the ritual itself. Viewers tuned in week after week, comforted by the familiarity, yet eager for the surprise. Behind the curtain of comedy, it showed Carson's mastery of timing, how he could stretch a laugh, milk a silence, or make failure itself funny. For audiences across the 60s, 70s, and 80s, Carnac became more than a sketch. It was a Tonight Show institution, a nightly reminder that Johnny Carson could make magic out of nothing more than an envelope and a twinkle in his eye. Moment 4 takes us to 1973, when Johnny Carson sat across from the most electrifying athlete on the planet, Muhammad Ali. From the moment Ali walked on stage, the atmosphere in the studio changed. The audience rose to its feet, cheering not just for a boxer but for a cultural icon. Carson welcomed him with that signature cool smile, but it didn't take long for the interview to turn into something closer to a sparring match. Ali, quick with words and brimming with charisma, threw verbal jabs about his opponents, politics, and fame itself. Carson, never one to be intimidated, slipped in witty counterpunches, letting his timing land just as sharply as any of Ali's quips. The crowd roared with every exchange, sensing they were watching two masters at work, one in the ring, the other behind the desk. What made it unforgettable wasn't conflict, but chemistry. Ali respected Carson enough to let him trade shots, and Carson admired Ali's brilliance enough to laugh along. For viewers, it felt like watching heavyweight boxing turned into comedy, the punches replaced with laughter. Decades later, fans still recall the sight of Carson leaning forward, eyes wide, grinning ear to ear as Ali declared himself the greatest. It was a meeting of legends, live on television. And it reminded America that The Tonight Show was more than entertainment. It was history unfolding in real time. Moment 3 brings us to one of the most emotional nights in television history. In May 1992, as Johnny Carson prepared to say goodbye to The Tonight Show after 3 decades, he welcomed singer Bette Midler as one of his final guests. What began as a light-hearted conversation soon shifted into something unforgettable. With the studio hushed, Midler leaned into the microphone and began to sing "One for My Baby and One More for the Road," a song of parting and reflection. Carson, usually so composed, sat back in his chair, eyes glistening. As the lyrics washed over him, the audience, too, fell into silence, many visibly moved by the weight of the moment. For once, there were no jokes, no banter, just raw emotion. Midler's voice carried not only the melody, but the collective gratitude of millions who had invited Carson into their homes night after night. When she finished, the crowd erupted in applause, and Carson, holding back tears, could only smile and nod. For viewers across America, it was a moment that transcended television, a goodbye song for a man who had given them 30 years of laughter. It was tender, unplanned, and absolutely timeless. Moment 2 brings us to May 22nd, 1992, the night America gathered to witness the end of an era. After 3 decades behind the desk, Johnny Carson took his final bow on The Tonight Show. It wasn't a flashy production filled with Hollywood celebrities clamoring for airtime. There was no parade of comedians, no gimmicks or scripted goodbyes. Instead, Carson chose something much more powerful: simplicity, just him, his desk, his audience, and a nation of nearly 87 million people watching from home. That night, his voice carried a quiet dignity as he spoke directly to the camera. He thanked the viewers for inviting him into their homes, thanked the crew who had become his second family, and spoke with a tenderness that felt more like a conversation with friends than a broadcast. For a man whose career was built on comedy, his restraint was what made the moment unforgettable. When his words faltered and his eyes shimmered with emotion, the silence in the studio felt sacred. It wasn't just the end of a show. It was the closing chapter of America's nightly ritual. People across the country remember exactly where they were when Johnny signed off. Living rooms went quiet, families leaned closer, and for a brief moment, television felt intimate and deeply human. Carson didn't just say goodbye. He reminded America why he mattered. The king of late night left not with a roar, but with a whisper, and that whisper still echoes. Decades later. Moment 1 came in January 2005, when America awoke to the news that Johnny Carson had died at 79. Though he had stepped away from television more than a decade earlier, his presence still lingered in the collective memory of a nation. In the days that followed, late-night television transformed into a space of remembrance. David Letterman devoted heartfelt monologues, Jay Leno replayed classic sketches, and networks across the country aired montages of Carson's finest moments. The quick wit, the arched eyebrow, the smirk that could level an audience. What made these tributes so powerful was the sincerity. Letterman, who had idolized Carson, called him the best there ever was. Leno admitted his entire career was possible because of Johnny's trailblazing. Even comedians of a younger generation spoke with reverence, acknowledging that every laugh they earned stood on Carson's shoulders. Viewers at home watched replays of his farewell bow in 1992, but this time, the silence felt heavier, final. It was no longer a retirement. It was an ending. Yet the tribute wasn't just grief, it was gratitude. In reliving those clips, America realized that Carson had not only defined late night, he had defined how a nation laughed together. His death confirmed what his life had already proven. Johnny Carson wasn't just the king of late night. He was a timeless voice, one that will never fade. As the countdown comes to a close, we are reminded that Johnny Carson was more than a television host. He was an American ritual. For 30 years, his presence behind that desk became a nightly anchor, a gentle reminder that laughter could carry us through both ordinary days and turbulent times. The 10 moments we've revisited are not just highlights of a career, but markers of a cultural era. Moments that united families in their living rooms. Moments that sparked conversation at water coolers the next morning. Moments that became woven into the very fabric of American life. Carson's gift was never only about delivering jokes. It was his timing, his grace, and above all, his humanity. He had the rare ability to make presidents feel approachable, superstars feel human, and audiences feel like they were part of something bigger than themselves. When he laughed, we laughed. When he grew quiet, we listened. And when he finally said goodbye, it felt as though a chapter in our own lives had closed. These moments remind us why Johnny Carson will forever be the king of late night. Not just for the laughter, but for the memories, for the way he turned television into companionship and comedy into legacy. And now, as we close this journey through Johnny Carson's most unforgettable moments, we'd love to hear from you. Which memory stays with you the most? Was it the unstoppable chaos of Robin Williams sending Carson into fits of laughter? Or Don Rickles turning The Tonight Show set into his own playground? Maybe it was one of those quiet, heartfelt goodbyes that reminded us of Carson's humanity. Whatever it may be, share your thoughts in the comments below. We want to know which of these legendary moments touched you the most. If you enjoyed revisiting the golden age of television, don't forget to subscribe. This is just the beginning of our series, Carson's Best Guests, where we'll continue to uncover the laughs, surprises, and timeless memories that made Johnny's Tonight Show the heartbeat of American culture. Subscribing ensures you won't miss the next chapter in this nostalgic journey. As you finish this video, take a look at the end screen. There, you'll find a direct link to The Guests Who Made Carson Lose Control, a collection of appearances so wild and unexpected that even the king of late night couldn't keep a straight face. Johnny Carson gave us laughter, comfort, and history. Now it's our turn to keep his legacy alive, together.